Last fall, I returned to a place I've been before, part of the High Coast Trail, the Skuleskogen National Park. At the time, I described it as the toughest day of hiking in my life, and expressed some regret over not being able to stay at the campsite in the park. Well, I gathered a group of friends to rectify that. This was a weekend adventure, so we drove up on Friday. When we arrived, it was already well past sunset, and we hiked in the few kilometers to the first campsite using our headlamps. This turned out to be a somewhat tricky ordeal due to some confusing signage and a trail that was not in the best of shapes.
Källtecken. 1.1. The big hike begins. Oh, we didn't. We're 700 meters in.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm full of trackers. There's a sign up here. There's a sign up here. Directions. Yeah, okay. This makes sense. This. No, we're waiting for you, slowpokes.
As it would turn out, that confidence wouldn't last very long.
This wasn't super clear.
Huh?
This trail wasn't super clear. My intuition is telling me go straight through this mess, but I'll go look. I mean, could this be a trail? Absolutely. Is it that sure the trail? No. Not this way, because we're on like a side trail, an alternate. This is going nowhere. This is going nowhere. But yeah, my guess is that it turns back towards the right more than goes straight here. It's certainly possible that we're off the trail already. Does that look good? I'm kind of thinking backtrack to where the trail was still apparent, yeah. Honestly, even here. Is that where we came from, or is that the continuation?
I think that's where it is.
I'm not so sure. So this I'm walking now is trail.
I think so.
Is it the first one we stepped over, maybe? Ah, that would make sense.
Here's a trail, yeah. Yeah, definitely trail, and here, like there was a pass from there that continues here.
Yeah, okay, we're going this way.
After getting only slightly lost, we set up camp, and then spent some time admiring the great view of the stars and the Milky Way afforded by a lack of light pollution and a clear night sky before going to bed. After a good night's sleep, we awoke to a beautiful morning and took our time getting ready for the day.
Good to know that we have someone that attracts the smoke.
Yeah.
Our plan for the day would take us up a more scenic route than the panicked one I had taken down the other way on my last visit, taking us up onto the mountain, then following the ridge to the Slottdalskrevan crevasse before dropping down the other side to the campsite at the lake. The trail led us up through a nice forest, passing by a gentle stream with a small waterfall, before turning first to a boardwalk, and then to the kind of rock fields that had caused me such grief last time. From this, we turned off the main trail up the mountainside, past the tree line.
Oh, there'll be more of this.
Yeah, demo.
All right. Let's do this fun thing.
The trail successively turned into more rocks and some steep and somewhat tricky climbs, but also very quickly exposing a fantastic view to all sides.
Yeah, okay. Oh! Yep. Quite a lot better views though. The funny thing is I think this path might actually be easier than the other one because the surface is actually more reasonable. Like the other one was walking over those types of rolling stone fields for like a kilometer. You see markers? Oh, nice.
We took our time making it up the mountainside, with some in the team struggling with the somewhat treacherous footing, and getting passed by some trail runners running up that very same path. Finally, as we reached the top, this exposed a wide ridge of rocks.
Nice. Yeah. Oh. Okay. So distracted by the view, I'm not looking where I'm stepping. Wow.
We had a nice snack break, taking in the view, before continuing along the ridge.
You can actually see
The campsite.
campsites.
Really close to the edge.
Probably aren't. That's kind of steep.
Yeah.
As we approached the crevasse, we needed to descend from the ridge, which turned into a very tricky and narrow path on the side of the mountain. Navigation was hard here, and we ended up having to do some quite tricky climbing to get past some obstacles.
Pretty much. Well, I mean the big part of it is across there.
The crevasse itself had been closed off since I was last here. Some accidents have happened, and park maintainers have concluded that they cannot safely keep the boulders from falling. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to hike through it before, but the view into it is still amazing, and you can still hike up a fair bit into it from the north side.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I walked here too. It was apparently like a year or two before they closed.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about somebody dying here, like a year or two after I was here. So that's probably the incident that caused it. Yeah.
We then had to get up the ridge on the other side to circle around the crevasse to the north end.
Ja.
Det är inte tid att skydda mig. Jag har blundat och fel.
Always a good strategy. Whew. Yep. It's cool that they still let you get into it, because it feels quite different from like being down here.
The rest of the way down to the campsite was much easier, although still quite rocky and rooty trails. Our plans for the day had included an optional out and back after setting up camp, but at this point we were all quite tired and chose to skip that excursion. We still had a huge descent along that route left for the morning. This still left us enough time in the evening to check out a cave along the route not far from camp and scout out the route for the morning. It also gave us a good amount of time to hang around camp with a nice fire. It was late in the year and temperatures during the night were set to drop to 4 degrees Celsius, so we set up for a cold night with a great fire and warm meals. Later, as we had gone to bed, the Aurora Borealis made an appearance. It was far too faint for any of us to pick up in the moment, but my time-lapse camera shows it very clearly. We were ready for the cold, but we were certainly not ready for the wind. None of the forecasts had strong winds, but the night escalated into very strong winds, and the mountains and the lake seemed to act a bit like a funnel, making the point we were camped on extremely exposed. Myself and another hiker in the group were camped in hammocks. Their tarp was flapping around wildly, and while mine was well anchored, the straps from the hammock binding were slapping the material of the hammock, leading to less than ideal sleep. Myself and the other hammock camper ended up getting up quite early, and as soon as I got out of the hammock it blew up entirely vertical in the wind. Several items had entirely blown away, including our trash bag and my sit pad, which had served as my landing spot under the hammock for getting out. Even my camera on its big tripod had been blown over by the wind, thankfully without damage. While waiting for the others to get up, we decided to take a hike around the lake to see if we could find the missing items, as much to get moving and warming up as from a desire not to litter, even accidentally. We had little hope of actually finding anything, but to our surprise we ended up recovering both the sit pad and the plastic bag, as well as another item we had not even realized was missing. Nina, who had acquired a cheap tent from a sporting goods store just for this trip, described the experience as, "I felt as if my tent was attacking me all night." Understandably, as her tent was at quite an angle. Sadly, the scramble of the morning means I don't have much footage of some of the worst of this. Anyway, we got our day started, packed up, and headed off. There were routing options for the day, and the intended route was marked as extremely challenging, with a special warning. Do not even attempt this in rainy conditions. Luckily, our night may have been cold and windy, but entirely dry. We certainly understood why when we got to the part. A very vertical scramble or climb down a crevasse filled with boulders.
Slow and steady.
Many members of the party were experienced climbers, so this wasn't normally a big deal. But things change when you're in the middle of nowhere with huge packs on.
There's some loose rocks here.
We slowly and methodically navigated the climb, with some members of the party doing double passes to help carry the packs of others who felt more insecure about the climb. In the end, everyone did great and made it down safe and sound.
Nice. So that's the end of it. And now we're back to regular old, still bad terrain.
Back down among the trees, the wind was also much more bearable.
There's a path around it.
Okay, this one is definitely pushable.
Oh yeah. Here's where you put your bombs to open the secret.
It's not even well hidden.
That's the point.
We did the small route onto a peninsula that would have been the out and back from the day before, checked out a few other campsites and small cabins, and took the opportunity to have lunch at one of the campsites right by the ocean.
What happened to all the disaster wind and stuff? Yeah. It sure should be one. Oh, and then there's the second one on the smaller island. Or we could pick which one is nicest.
For doing it quite efficiently and going on.
Yeah.
Alright.
Oh. Okay. The wind is back. Yeah.
Our way back then had a route choice. One way was longer, but there were some indications that it could be flatter and better footing since it was marked as a bikes allowed route, so we chose that one. Boy, were we wrong. The trail was still just as rocky, so in the end we ended up fooling ourselves to add more distance. This meant our way out became a bit of a slog, and it was quite late when we got back to the first campsite. From there, the path out was a wide and smooth gravel and boardwalk trail, which we should have taken on the way in if the signs had pointed the right way. Finally back at the cars, we got ready for the drive back home, arriving back around midnight. This sure was an adventure in many unexpected ways, but I am very happy I returned to Skuleskogen and got to more fully experience its beauty.